put up with my boss humiliating me for far too long, because I needed that job and figured no one would ever come for me, until the day he grabbed me by the arm, screamed at me in front of everyone, and the entire dining room went silent. Behind him stood Fulvio Ricci, the most dangerous man in Positano, looking like he'd destroy anyone who laid a hand on me. I should have been afraid of him. But, for the first time in my life, I felt like maybe someone could protect me without breaking me. Hi, I'm Lena. A special shout out to those of you watching Book 1 for free here on the My Stories platform, completely ad-free and uninterrupted. Chapter 1. The Glass That Didn't Fall From My Hand. The dining room was as full as it only ever got on Friday nights, when tourists paid triple for a view the sea gave away for free. Positano's colorful facades lit up outside, hanging from the cliff like antique earrings, and the smell of butter browned with rosemary rose from the kitchen in slow waves that kept customers in their chairs for one more bottle of wine. I carried the tray with both arms because the third order for table 7 was heavy, and because the sleeve of my uniform already had a small tear in the seam I hadn't given myself time to mend before my shift. My breathing was shallow on those Fridays, the kind you learn when you know a night full of tourists can turn into anything. The woman at table 9 laughed loudly. The man beside her, tie loosened, glass in the wrong hand, stretched out his elbow to flag down someone who wasn't me. The crystal glass sitting at the edge of the table rolled half a centimeter, stopped, rolled again, and crashed to the floor before I could close the distance between us. The sound came in 2 parts, the snap of the foot separating from the stem, and then the brief silence of 5 tables turning their heads at once, as if the noise had given a signal no one had agreed on. I thought fast. I thought the man would apologize because his elbow was still stretched out over the tablecloth. I thought maybe no one would look longer than that 1 second. I thought that, with luck, Dario would be in the back office with the door closed. He wasn't. He came down the service hallway with the stride of a man who wanted every step to be heard, his apron immaculate, his beard trimmed, and the blue eyes he insisted on keeping visible because he thought they softened the rest of his face. They didn't. I saw the way he shortened the distance to the table, and the way he reached me first with his eyes, before he arrived with the rest of him. There was something calculated in that stride, as if he'd been waiting for an opportunity like this. "Was it you?" he asked, too loud for the hour, too soft to seem like a real question. "No, sir," I said. The customer knocked it over. His hand was on my arm before I finished the sentence. It closed around my elbow, on the inside, at that spot where the sleeve was thin because of the seam. It squeezed. Not enough for the customer at table 9 to notice. Enough for me to feel the blood stop circulating in my forearm. I didn't drop the tray. I kept my shoulders raised and my fingers locked around the metal handle, because the tray was the only thing I could hold onto in that moment. "On your knees," he said. "Clean it up." I didn't blink. I didn't answer. The dining room had stopped chewing. The woman at table 9 held her napkin to her mouth as if she were at the theater. I looked at the floor, at the shards scattered in the shape of a half moon, at the puddle of wine that had already reached the tip of my shoe and soaked into the leather like a stain I knew wouldn't come out easily. I said, "On your knees, low." The tray was still on my left arm. I thought of my mother. I thought of her in the hospital bed, with that voice of someone already accepting the way out, telling me I had to learn to swallow whatever came because no one would choose a girl with a mixed accent and no dowry. I swallowed a lot because of that sentence. The late rent, my father's silence in a city that wasn't this one, the first 3 months of Dario. I swallowed even when swallowing hurt more than what was coming in, but I did not bend my knee. "The glass didn't fall from my hand," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "I'll get the broom." Dario squeezed harder. I felt his thumbnail dig into my skin, a pressure point that throbbed all the way up to my shoulder. "You'll get," he said, close to my ear, with the cold coffee breath he always had after 8. "Whatever I tell you to." That's when a chair scraped at the back of the dining room. It wasn't an ordinary sound. It was the sound of a heavy chair being pushed back slowly, with a calm that held more attention than the broken glass had. I didn't turn my head because Dario's grip forced me to look down, but out of the corner of my eye I saw the shadow rise. Tall, straight, black suit, white shirt, no tie, buttoned all the way to the top. He crossed the dining room with the measured steps of a man who had never needed to run in his life, and the silence opened a path in front of him, as if it knew it was better not to be there. He stopped a meter from us. He put both hands in his pants pockets. He didn't look at me first. He looked at Dario's hand on my arm, and he kept looking a second longer than he needed to, like someone registering every detail before deciding what to do with it. "Let go," he said. One word, without raising his voice, without a change in tone. I had never heard a one-syllable word carry so much weight, as if that final consonant had roots running straight down through the floorboards of the dining room. Dario looked up, and took a second longer than he should have to answer. I saw his grimace try to become a smile and fail to get there. "Signor Ricci," Dario began, and his voice no longer had the same volume as before. "This is a house matter." "Let go," the man repeated. Dario's hand loosened on my elbow. It didn't let go completely. It loosened, like someone testing whether he could still keep something. "I said," the man continued, in the same low voice, without moving a muscle in his face, "take your hand off her." I didn't say loosen it. Dario took his hand away. The air in my chest came back at the wrong moment. It came back with a force that made me breathe deep, and I hated it. I hated the relief. I hated the way the entire dining room had frozen to wait for this man's words, and how Dario, who had been stone for 2 years, was suddenly clay in his hands. I hated feeling that the relief came from outside, from someone I hadn't asked for. I lifted my chin. I looked straight at the man in the black suit. He had the kind of face that didn't fit into a single description. Firm jaw, short hair going gray at the temples, dark eyes the way dark eyes get when they've been through things too early that they shouldn't have. Early 30s, 35 at most. He was handsome, but not the kind of handsome that announces itself. It was the beauty of a man who walks into a place and doesn't ask permission because he knows no one will ask it back. I recognized the name Dario had said, Ricci. It was the kind of surname you heard whispered low at the market, at the end of conversations, and that fell silent when a child appeared in the doorway. I knew enough to be afraid, not enough to understand why. He looked at me for the first time. His eyes passed over my elbow, saw the red mark that would turn purple before midnight, and came back to my face. They stayed there. I waited for something. A nod, a sentence, an "Are you okay?" The savior reflex this kind of man kept in his pocket to use at the right moment. It didn't come. "You can finish serving table 7, he said. "I'm going to talk with your boss." And that was it. That was the sentence. It wasn't protection. It was an order. He didn't treat me like a victim. He treated me like an employee with a half-finished job. I didn't know whether that irritated me or relieved me more than the rest of it. I swallowed what I wanted to say, straightened the tray, and went to finish serving table 7. When I came back, Dario was no longer in the dining room. The man in the black suit wasn't either. The kitchen was breathing again. Forks clinked against plates as if nothing had happened, and the woman at table 9 had already ordered another glass. The drunk customer paid his bill without complaint. I don't know if that happened on its own, or if someone helped. Giada pulled me by my good elbow the moment I crossed the double kitchen door. The heat inside was thick, full of steam and the smell of garlic, and she already had the red face of someone who'd spent the whole shift bent over the stove. "Katerina, show me," she said. "Later. Show me now." Giada was 24. She made salads and desserts, cursed in 3 languages, and had a mother who spoke all 3 worse than she did. She was the only person in that town who knew my room number and my dead mother's name. She pushed my sleeve up without asking and looked at the mark. The skin was dark and a half moon that traced exactly the outline of Dario's thumb. "Son of a," she began. "Don't finish." "I will finish. Son of an old bitch." "Who was the one in the suit?" "I don't know his full name." "You don't need the full one. Who was he?" I looked at her. "Ricci." Giada stopped stirring the wooden spoon in the pot. She looked at me like I'd said the Pope's name, with that mix of reverence and fright that shows up when someone mentions something too big for the size of the room. "Katerina," she said slowly, "you know who Ricci is." "I know what they say." "It's not what they say. It's what he is. He just told him to let go of me. He just told him," Giada repeated, and went back to stirring the spoon with more force than necessary, the handle knocking against the sides of the pot, in a rhythm that sounded more like a warning than cooking. "Katerina, a man like that doesn't walk into a restaurant by accident. He doesn't drink a glass of wine alone in a corner without a reason. You opened a door today and it wasn't you who opened it." I didn't answer. I grabbed the next ticket from the clip on the counter and left. The rest of the shift was a blur. Dario didn't come back to the dining room for the rest of the night. The man in the black suit didn't either. When I closed out the register and took off my apron, the kitchen clock read 11:30, and I had decided 3 things. First, that I'd put Arnica on my elbow before bed. Second, that I'd come back the next day for the lunch shift as if nothing had happened, because rent was due Tuesday. Third, that I would not think about him. I left through the back door to avoid the main sidewalk. The night was clear. The sea licked the stone wall below the street, and the smell of the wind was salt with a bass note of jasmine rising from the flowered balconies of the side street. I walked to the bus stop with my coat buttoned up to my chin, even though I wasn't cold. I sat on the cold metal bench. I looked at the ground, at the uneven cobblestones of the sidewalk I already knew by heart, every patch of cement, every crack. When I looked up, he was on the other side of the street. He didn't cross. He didn't wave. He made no gesture at all. He had both hands in his pockets again, and the suit looked blacker under the street lamp than it had inside the dining room. For a second, I thought about crossing the street and asking what he wanted. For another second, I thought about pretending I hadn't seen him. I ended up doing the second thing, because the bus arrived. I got on through the front door, paid my fare, sat by the window. I looked through the fogged glass as the bus pulled away. He was still there. He didn't follow me with his eyes. He looked at the stop sign, at the corner, at the torn poster on the wall, as if he were just standing there, waiting for someone who wasn't me. The bus climbed the hill the usual way. I rested my temple against the cold glass and closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sway of the engine do the work of emptying my head. I repeated in my mind the 3 things I'd decided in the kitchen. The third came with more force because it was the hardest. I would not think about him. I would not think about him. I would not think about him. I got to my room, locked the door with 2 turns of the key, changed clothes in the dark, and lay down without dinner. The little bathroom window let in a piece of streetlight that painted the ceiling a faint yellow, trembling slightly as if the sea wind reached that far. I closed my eyes, and I fell asleep thinking about the way he had looked at my elbow before he looked at my face. Chapter 2. The Customer at the Corner Table. Wednesday's long-sleeved uniform was not the same as Friday's. I had chosen the thicker fabric, the one that came down to the wrist and had a cuff closed with a button, because the bruise on my elbow had turned into a continent-shaped map with yellowed edges, the kind of mark the dining room lights would find if I let them. From the window of my room, I looked at the low, late-afternoon sun striking the terracotta-colored tiles, took a deep breath, and went down the hill to work as if nothing had happened on Friday. The bakery on the corner smelled of yeast and warm olive oil. I bought a small loaf for breakfast and heard the girl behind the counter say, without stopping her wrapping, that Dario had been on edge since Friday. I didn't comment. I paid and continued down the narrow sidewalk with the sea breeze coming from somewhere I couldn't see. At the restaurant, I came in through the service door. The back hallway smelled of lemon detergent and the steam coming from the still-cold kitchen. Giada was waiting for me with an espresso resting on the counter and a look that needed no words. "Come back with your arm hidden," she said. "Come back with my arm hidden." I agreed. Good girl. Go work. Wednesday's dining room was quieter than Friday's. Late tourists, old couples who didn't need conversation, tables spaced out with white tablecloths without a single fold out of place. The late afternoon light came in through the window facing the sea and turned everything the color of honey. I grabbed my pad and did the first round of orders with the false lightness of someone trained not to be noticed. It worked until 8 at night. That's when he walked in. He came unaccompanied. He crossed the dining room with the same calm as Friday, his broad shoulders in no hurry, and sat at the corner table, near the window facing the sea, and ordered sparkling water before the menu even arrived. The maître d' didn't bring the menu. He carried it. He held it in his hand with a delicacy I had never seen in him. It was the first time I saw our maître d' serve a table standing as if he were awaiting orders from his father. I pretended not to see. I served table 2, cleared table 4, brought wine to the couple at the window on the other side. I kept shifting to different corners of the dining room to stay out of his field of vision. It didn't work. When I passed close enough to hear the crackle of the candles in the holders at the next table, I saw his finger tap twice on the edge of the white tablecloth. "You can bring me a coffee," he said, without lifting his head from the menu. And the tuna. Rare. I wrote it down with the most indifferent handwriting I could manage. "Anything else, Signor Ricci?" He raised his eyes. They were dark and direct, the kind that don't search for what to see because they've already seen everything they needed to. "Fulvio, do you wish for anything else, Signor Ricci?" He smiled in a way that didn't reach the rest of his face, and went back to the menu as if the conversation had ended exactly where he wanted it to. "No, thank you." I took the order to the kitchen. Giada was on the other side of the counter with her knife stopped in the middle of an onion, her eyes lifted toward the dining room, the one in the black suit. She said, "I know. Corner table. I know. He came to see you. He came to eat tuna. Katerina." Giada. She cut the onion with a precision that seemed like irritation disguised as efficiency. I served the coffee with a steady hand. I set the cup down without a sound, straightened the saucer, and stepped back before he could say anything. I served the tuna with a steady hand. I served the dessert he hadn't ordered but the maître d' insisted on sending, with a steady hand. The lemon cream sat slightly tilted on the plate, and I corrected it before setting it down. When I brought the bill, he paid in cash, and left a bill on the saucer worth a month of my salary. I looked at the money. I looked at him. "No, thank you," I said. "It's not charity." "Even so, it's the usual tip." "It's not the usual tip anywhere, sir." He looked at me a second longer than he needed to, as if he were settling an account I didn't know had been opened. "Good night, Katerina." I hadn't told him my name. He stood up, straightened his jacket with 2 brief movements, and left the dining room through the front door without looking back. Outside, leaning against the fender of a black car whose bodywork gleamed under the entrance light, an older man waited with both hands behind his back, graying hair, military posture, his eyes scanning the street in a calm way that made everything seem monitored. He was the driver. Later I would learn his name was Tiziano. That night he just opened the back door, waited for Fulvio to get in, and closed it with a soft, precise click, in no hurry at all. Before the car pulled away, Tiziano looked at me through the window of the dining room and touched the brim of his hat once. I turned quickly toward the kitchen. "Giada," I said. "He left an absurd tip." "How much?" I showed her the bill. She let out a word in 3 languages at once while drying her hands on her apron. "Are you going to give it back?" "I'm going to give it back." "How?" "In coins." Giada laughed for the first time in 3 days. The sound echoed in the empty kitchen and lingered a second longer than necessary. The next day he came back, and the day after that too. He didn't always order the tuna. He ordered octopus in olive oil. He ordered pasta with botarga. He ordered, on a night of fine rain dripping against the windows, just coffee and bread and butter. Always at the same corner table. Always with the chair turned slightly toward the dining room instead of toward the window. Always with Tiziano waiting in the car outside under the yellow glow of the street lamp. On one of those nights, a middle-aged man with a brown leather briefcase and thin glasses sat with him for half an hour, and the two spoke in low voices, looking at folded papers on the table. That man was called Orlando, I found out on the 3rd day, because Dario let the name slip in the kitchen without realizing I was passing through the hallway. Orlando was an accountant. That detail lodged itself in my head and stayed there, without a proper place, nagging at me. On the 4th night, I returned the absurd tip in counted coins, inside a white envelope sealed with my thumb, on the bread saucer. He opened the envelope in front of me with the calm of a man who has all the time in the world, counted with the tip of his index finger, and closed it. "One's missing," he said. "It isn't. It is. You can count it again. I've counted it twice. So have I." He put the envelope away slowly in the inside pocket of his jacket, without taking his eyes off me. "Good night, Katerina." "Good night, sir." I left the dining room before he could stand up, and went straight to the kitchen to fetch a pitcher of water no one had asked for. It was on the 8th night. I had been counting, even though I didn't want to. Dario had already started looking at me in a way that wasn't rage or pure calculation. It was both things mixed in proportions that changed every day. I closed the dining room late, changed shoes in the locker room, and left through the front door, because the back one had had a jammed lock since morning, and no one had called the technician yet. He was on the sidewalk, standing, hands in his pockets, tie slightly loosened, the fresh sea air catching the collar of his jacket. "I can take you home," he said. "No, thank you. It's late. It's late every day." "I know." I gripped the strap of my bag and looked at the street, at the mist-wet cobblestones, at the orange reflection of the restaurant on the stone. Not at him. "Signor Ricci, Fulvio, Signor Ricci, I don't know what you want." He put his hands in his pockets with a slow movement and turned his face toward the sea across the street, toward the white lights of the boats sitting out on the water, toward the horizon the night had swallowed. He stayed like that for a few seconds. Then he looked at me. "Today, I wanted to take you to the stop. There's no bus after midnight. I know my bus schedule." "You do?" "I do." He nodded once, briefly, and didn't add anything. "Good night, then." He turned his back and walked the 3 steps to the car with the same calm he did everything. Tiziano opened the door. Before getting in, Fulvio paused with his hand on the handle, looked over his shoulder, and said, "Katerina." "Yes." "Did the bruise get better?" I stayed silent. I felt the heat rise up my neck and die before reaching my face. The wind brought the smell of sea spray and pine from the park up on the hill. "It got better," I said. Good. He got into the car without another word. Tiziano closed the door with the same precise click as always, and, before walking around to the driver's side, scratched his temple with the tip of his thumb and murmured loud enough for me to hear from the other side of the sidewalk. Boss, in 2 weeks you've drunk more coffee at this restaurant than in 15 years of your life. The driver's door slammed. The car pulled away slowly, headlights sweeping the wet street, and disappeared around the bend in the descent. I went to the bus stop with my hand clenched on the strap of my bag and my mouth dry. The stop was a 4-minute walk away. I counted every one. When I got to my room, I sat on the edge of the bed without turning on the light. The mattress creaked slightly. I looked at the window, at the slice of sky between the buildings with the first stars appearing through the mist. I thought of 3 things, in this order. I thought that the bruise on my elbow no longer hurt when touched, only when pressed. I thought that I had started to hear the bell of the restaurant's front door every day at 8, and to recognize the weight of his steps on the stone floor before I turned my face. I thought that this was exactly what my mother had taught me not to do, to recognize someone by the way he walked before knowing whether he deserved to be recognized. I turned on the light, changed clothes, and went to brush my teeth harder than I needed to. It was the next morning, before opening, that I saw the envelope in the office. I shouldn't have been there. I had gone in to get the clean apron from the bottom drawer of the file cabinet because Dario had told the assistant to move the pile of laundry to that drawer the week before, and I still found it strange but had stopped questioning it. The door was ajar, the light inside was on but low, and Dario was in the kitchen yelling at the hotline assistant. I went in, opened the drawer, took the apron, and that's when I looked at the desk. There was a brown envelope on top of the invoice folder. No name, no sender. It was the thick kind, the kind used to hold a lot of money or a lot of papers that shouldn't exist. It was half open, the flap folded inward but not sealed. I didn't touch it. I didn't go near it. I just looked from where I was standing. Beside the envelope was a notebook open to a page of penciled calculations, the numbers small and cramped, the handwriting of someone who writes fast, not wanting anyone to read it. A column on the left with the employees' names. Beside each name, a number. Beside my name, a number I had never seen before, and that didn't correspond to anything I could have bought, broken, or owed. Low. Beside it, a number that corresponded to nothing. I closed the drawer slowly, without a sound, with the hand that was steady because I had decided it needed to be. I left the office with the apron folded over my arm. I crossed the service hallway, passed in front of Dario without looking away but without seeking him out, grabbed my pad from the dining room counter, and went to set the tables for opening, repositioning each utensil with more attention than was necessary. The doorbell rang at 8 o'clock sharp. I did not raise my head. Chapter 3. Receipts and Small Promises. Saturday began with the smell of stale bread in my kitchen. It was what was left of Signora Esposito's basket, and I chewed slowly, sitting on the edge of the narrow bed, looking at the damp-stained ceiling of the rented room. 10 days had passed since the night of the glass, and 6 since the morning I closed Dario's drawer without a sound. The morning the bell rang at 8 o'clock sharp, and I didn't raise my head, pretending the sound of the front door wasn't his. I hadn't managed to go back to that drawer, not yet, but the page with my name beside the word debt was still in there, waiting, and I felt its weight on every shift. I put on the white uniform blouse, buttoned it up to my neck, hid once more the yellowed mark running down from my elbow. The mark was fading, finally, but I kept the long sleeve out of habit. I left the building early, went down the hill of uneven stones, and reached the restaurant before the lunch hour, when the dining room takes a deep breath between one wave of customers and the next. Giada was in the kitchen, peeling garlic with the knife caught between her fingers as if she wanted to punish the bulb. "You got here too early today," she said without looking up. Is that a sign of trouble, or of you finally landing a decent lover?" "Neither one," I answered, tying my apron behind my back. "I need to get into the office." She stopped the knife in the air. She looked at me over her shoulder. Giada was 24, and had a face that seemed to be laughing even when she was serious, but in that second, her face went blank. "What office, Katerina?" "Dario's." "For what?" I leaned against the counter and looked toward the back door, making sure no one was coming down the hallway. I lowered my voice. "There's a drawer. There's a notebook. My name is in it next to a word that shouldn't be there." Giada dropped the garlic. She wiped her hands on the dirty rag and came close. So close I could smell the olive oil on her apron. "Say the word. Debt." She breathed through her nose, restrained, and looked at the ceiling as if asking someone up there for patience. "Son of a bitch," she muttered. I knew it. I knew he took it from the pay and called it a broken glass fee. I always figured that broken glass could fill an entire china cabinet. I need proof. I can't just say it. Proof, she repeated, and her eyes lit up. You know what? I'll go in with you. I'll distract him and you grab the notebook. No, you stay here. If we both disappear at the same time, he'll notice. Katerina, I can pretend I cut my finger. I could even actually cut it, if that's what it takes. Don't cut your finger. I could set the curtain in the dining room on fire. Small, a discreet little flame. Giada, I could say I saw a rat. Stop, I said, and I almost laughed, but I held it. The only thing you're going to do is keep an eye on the hallway. If Dario shows up, drop a pot. The worst pot you can find. She crossed her arms. She tilted her head. Fine, but if I drop the good pot, it's your fault. I waited for the right moment. Dario always went up to the second-floor storeroom before Saturday lunch, checking the wine bottles he claimed were too expensive to trust the waiters with. When the storeroom door slammed, I counted to 10 and crossed the service hallway. His office smelled of stale cigarettes and stored paper. The window looked out onto the back wall, and the light came in yellow, dirty, striking the dark wooden desk where Dario stacked receipts as if they were threats. I went straight to the right-hand drawer. It was unlocked. Dario thought no one would dare. The notebook was there, black cover, loose spiral. I opened it to the page marked by a string. I saw my name again. I saw the numbers. I saw the column of accumulated debt, growing month by month, always round, always in the same lazy handwriting. I also saw the other names, Marco, Elena, even Giada, with their own debts. I took my phone from my apron pocket, opened the camera, photographed every page, 32 photos, steady hands on the outside, trembling fingers on the inside. As I was about to close the drawer, I saw the brown envelope, the same one I had glimpsed the morning before. I lifted the flap. Inside, a wad of folded bills and a handwritten receipt, no letterhead, with the name V and a date. I didn't have the courage to touch anything else. I put the envelope back in its exact position. I closed the drawer. I left. Giada was leaning against the kitchen door when I passed. So, 32 photos. 32, she repeated, as if counting small victories. Can I hug you, or are you still pretending to be tough? I'm pretending. Then pretend well. The dining room began to fill up. I put on my work smile and went to the tables. I served wine, cleared plates, smiled at a French couple who ordered the same dessert twice. Around 3 in the afternoon, when the sun struck straight onto the restaurant's terrace, the main door opened, and Orlando walked in. Calm gait, gray jacket, a thin briefcase under his arm. Behind him, in no hurry, Fulvio. I felt the air in the dining room change before I saw. It was always like that when he came in. It wasn't noise. It was the lack of it. The conversations dropped half a tone without anyone noticing. The two of them sat at a small table near the window. I went to take their order, pretending not to know the face I had memorized against my will. Fulvio ordered coffee. Orlando ordered water. I went back to the kitchen and came back to the dining room with the tray, and when I passed beside their table, I caught a glimpse of the paper Orlando had opened between them. A handwritten spreadsheet, a column of names, and 2 words underlined in pencil at the top, Viscari and notebook. Fulvio raised his eyes at the exact moment I set the coffee cup down on the table. I blinked. He blinked back, slowly, and returned to looking at Orlando as if nothing had happened. But his hand, which was on the table, slid a centimeter closer to the cup, as if it wanted to brush mine when I withdrew the tray. It didn't. I pulled my hand back first, but the air between us hung still for 2 seconds. Thank you, Katerina, he said. You're welcome, I answered, and moved away without looking back. Viscari. The name stayed in my head the rest of the afternoon, tapping lightly, like a distant bell. I left work at 11. Sunday dawned with a good wind and a sky washed blue. I decided to go down early to the Piazza Market, buy oranges, a little cheese, bread for Signora Esposito. I put the cloth bag under my arm and went down the hill, taking in the air like someone taking medicine. The market piazza was a square of white stalls, smelling of ripe tomatoes and fresh fish. I had my back to the fruit stand when a low voice behind me said, "The ones underneath are better. He puts the top ones out in the sun to make them look ripe." I turned. Fulvio was standing a step away from me, without his jacket, black shirt with sleeves folded to the elbow, empty hands. No Tiziano in sight, no car in sight. "So now you're an expert on oranges, too?" I asked. I grew up in a place with more orange trees than people. Some things stick. What a coincidence. You at the market. On a Sunday morning. Right beside my stall. It's not a coincidence. Ah, I figured you'd rather know. He took hold of the cloth bag I was balancing on my hip. He didn't take it from me. He rested his hand on the bottom of it, like someone helping to support the weight. I didn't let go. We both held the same bag for a moment. I can carry it, I said. I know you can. Can I walk with you to the hill anyway? I thought about refusing. I thought about throwing the line back with sarcasm, the way I'd trained my whole life. But I was tired of training. I just nodded and started walking. We climbed the hill slowly, in silence, stepping on the same uneven stones I stepped on every night. He walked on the outside, close to the street, without commenting. When the hill turned, he spoke. You were in his office yesterday? I stopped. I looked at him. It wasn't a question. How do you know? Your hand smelled of old paper when you served the coffee, and the way you handed back the tray was that of someone who'd just done something dangerous. 32 photos. He nodded once. Where are they? On my phone. Don't keep them on your phone. Don't keep them at home. Where then? In a safe I don't have. With someone no one would connect to you. Someone no one would look for. I climbed 2 more steps, thinking. Signora Esposito came to mind. The elderly neighbor, a widow for 20 years, who traded bread for coffee and had never set foot in the restaurant. No one would connect my name to hers. I have someone, I said. Send it today. Don't print it yet. Send only the file, in a sealed envelope, with a code word that only you and she will know. Why are you telling me this? Why don't you take them yourself? He stopped on the hill. He leaned his back against the low stone wall. I crossed my arms, 3 steps above him, which put me at eye level with him for the first time. If I take them now, he'll know before nightfall. He has ears in places I haven't closed off yet. If you keep them, and keep them right, he has no way of finding out until the right moment. And you decide the right moment. No, you decide. I looked at him in silence. The sun struck his face, and I saw for the first time, with the clarity of morning, that he had a small scar near his left temple, thin as a strand of hair. I didn't ask. Why do you care? I asked instead. He took his time to answer. The wind passed between us, carrying the smell of the sea. I don't know, he said at last, and it's the first thing in 15 years that I don't know. The sentence hit me in a way I didn't expect. I felt the heat rising up my neck, and I went down the 2 steps that separated me from him, stopping too close. I saw his breath catch for a second. I saw his gaze drop from my eyes to my mouth and come back. He didn't kiss me. He didn't touch me. He just stood there, restrained, like a man who had learned too early not to take what he wanted. I'm going up, I said, and my voice came out lower than I intended. Go. I climbed the hill, feeling his back accompany me in silence up to the corner. When I reached the door of my building, I turned around. He was standing down below, hands in his pockets, looking up as if deciding whether it was worth climbing another flight. He didn't climb. I almost asked him to. Almost. I didn't. I went in. I closed the door. I leaned my forehead against the wood and stayed there until my heart went back to the rhythm of a normal person. That night, I took the bread to Signora Esposito's door. She opened it with her usual smile, white hair tied back with a blue scarf. I asked a small favor. I said I had some things of mine, unimportant papers, that I needed to leave with someone I trusted. She didn't ask a question. She just took the envelope I brought ready, with the word, oranges, written on the outside, and put it inside an empty tea box that sat on the highest shelf of her kitchen. When you want it back, say oranges, she said. I'll understand. Thank you. Be careful on the hill at night, girl. I went back to my room, climbing the steps without listening to what came behind me. It was funny. 10 days before, I climbed those same stairs afraid of the next day. That night, I climbed afraid of the next day. Yes, but for the first time the fear had company. I had proof. I had an old witness. I had a man who didn't know why he cared. And on Monday morning, when I walked into the restaurant with my head held high, I saw Dario watching me from the counter. His eyes had changed. It was no longer the thick rage of before. It was something calmer, colder. He looked at me, the way one looks at a small animal before calculating the size of the cage. I went to the dining room. I began setting the tables. I heard his steps cross the floor slowly, stop behind me, and stay there, behind me, without saying a word, for far too long. Chapter 4. Rain Car Truth. It rained all Tuesday afternoon. The kind of Positano rain that seems to be born from the sea and rise up through the stones, wetting the walls before it wets the ground. When I got to the restaurant at 4 p.m, the dining room already had that smell of damp fabric and candle wax that lingered on days like this, a mixture that stuck in your throat and made the afternoon seem heavier than it was. The customers started canceling reservations around 6. By 9, only 3 tables were left, and Dario, behind the counter, counted the register with a contained rage that didn't look at me, but weighed in the air like pressure before a storm. 5 days had passed since the hill on Sunday. 5 days in which Fulvio hadn't come back to the restaurant. 5 days in which Dario had taken to walking behind me in silence, without saying anything, just weighing. I felt his gaze follow me between the kitchen and the dining room like a rope being slowly wound around my wrists. Giada noticed on the 2nd day. She said only one sentence, in the kitchen, as she passed me a plate. "Be careful, he's not cursing at you anymore." I knew what that meant. In Dario, silence was the eve. That Tuesday night, with the rain weighing on the roof and the last table being cleared before 10, Dario turned off the exterior lights earlier than he should have. He sent the other waiters home one by one, handing out excuses about slow business and overtime costs. He kept only me. He didn't say why. He didn't need to. "You stay until I close," he said, without looking. "Yes, sir." I cleaned the tables twice, folded napkins no one would use the next day, reorganized the utensils in the drawer for the 3rd time. The empty dining room sounded different. Each of my steps echoed a little more than it should, and the rain outside seemed amplified by so much silence in here. When it passed 11, the rain grew so heavy that the sound of the water drowned out everything else. I looked through the window. The street was a shining corridor of wet stone, without a single person, without a single car. The last bus passed at 12:10. I had 20 minutes. "May I go, sir?" Dario looked up from the ledger. He took too long to answer. He looked at me in a way that wasn't rage. It was calculation. "You may?" I grabbed my bag. I left through the back door, down the service hallway that smelled of cooking oil and cold detergent, and when I set foot on the sidewalk, the rain hit my face like a cold slap. I covered my head with my thin coat, started down the street toward the stop, counting the seconds. The stones were slippery, glossy with water, and each step demanded attention. I stumbled twice. I reached the stop soaked, my blouse stuck to my back and my coat heavy with moisture, and I stood there looking at the piazza clock. 12:12. The bus had passed. I sighed. I looked both ways down the deserted street. The hill up to my building took 40 minutes on foot on a good day. In that rain, it would be an hour. I leaned my head against the stop's post and closed my eyes for a second, calculating whether I could do it, weighing whether it was worse to get soaked to the bone or to owe the world favors. That's when I heard the engine. I opened my eyes. On the other side of the street, sitting in neutral, with low headlights tearing through the curtain of rain, was the black car. Tiziano wasn't driving. Somehow I knew he'd sent him away for this night to be exactly this night. It was Fulvio driving, alone, and he was looking at me through the open window with an expression that asked for nothing and offered everything. I crossed the street without deciding to. My feet went before my head. When I reached the car, he stretched his arm across the passenger seat and opened the door from inside. "Get in," he said. I got in. The warmth of the car hit my skin and it hurt, the way it hurts when the body is frozen and discovers its blood again. I sat down, closed the door, and stayed still in the seat, water dripping from my hair onto the leather. He took his coat from the back seat and handed it to me without a word. I put it over my shoulders. It was heavy, thick fabric, and it smelled of cedar and something else I couldn't name, something between old rain and warmed wood. "How long have you been here?" "Long enough. You knew I'd miss the bus. I knew he'd keep you until after midnight." "How?" "Because it's what I'd do, if I were afraid of what you know." I looked at him from the side, his profile cut by the faint light of the dashboard, his jaw clenched, his fingers firm on the wheel. He didn't look at me. He shifted into first, and the car pulled away slowly along the waterfront, the tires whispering on the wet stone. For a while, neither of us spoke. The wipers scraped the glass in a monotonous rhythm, and the rain drummed on the roof. The windows began to fog. He lowered the hot air a little to let the glass breathe, and the warmth coming from the vent reached my feet first. "You don't owe me a thank you," he said at last. "I wasn't going to thank you." He almost smiled, but the smile didn't fully arrive. "You good. Why did you come?" "Because the rain was bad tonight. That's not the answer. He breathed deep. He slowed down for no apparent reason. He pulled the car over at a stretch of the waterfront, where the low wall separated the road from the drop to the sea, the dark stones gleaming on the outside. He shut off the engine. He left only the dashboard lit. The rain continued, but there, stopped. Its sound seemed more intimate, less like a storm, more like a confession. Because I stayed away for 5 days, he said, looking at the fogged glass, and it was worse than if I had come every day. The sentence entered me the way water enters a thin coat, slowly, through all the places where the fabric was already worn. There was no defending myself against it. Why did you stay away? Because I thought that if I came again, I wouldn't be able to leave anymore. I looked at my hand on my knee. It was trembling, and it wasn't the cold. I pressed my hand to my chest, on top of his coat, and breathed deep, trying to organize what was growing inside me without asking permission. My mother, I began, and stopped. I took in air again. My mother died telling me, in a morphine voice, that I would never be chosen by anyone good. She said it with pity. She thought it was a favor, to prepare me for a world where a girl like me has no dowry and no accent that opens doors. He turned his face slowly toward me. He said nothing. I grew up accepting that, I continued. I worked in 3 places before the restaurant. In all of them, someone squeezed my arm once. I never told anyone. I left quietly, looked for another job, convinced myself it was normal, that it was the price of working, that anything different was naivete on my part. When I started at the restaurant, I thought this time it would last longer, and it did. 2 years. Katerina, let me finish. He nodded. He went quiet with a quality few men have. His silence didn't pressure or fill the space. It just waited. When you walked into the dining room that night and told Dario to let go of me, I hated you for about 10 seconds, for making me look weak in front of everyone. Then I hated you for another 10, for having shown up only once, as if it were possible to do that and just leave. Then I gave up hating you. That was worse. He let the air out through his nose. He was looking at me now without pretending not to. My younger sister was named Bianca, he said, and his voice came out different on that name. Slower, more careful, like someone carrying a fragile weight. She was 22 when she died. I was the older brother. I was the one who decided, who protected, who paid the bills. I thought power was enough. I put men at her door, around her, behind her. I didn't see that the only person she was truly afraid of was a man who slept beside her. I didn't see it because I thought he was too small to be dangerous. I was wrong. Bianca died in a small kitchen in a small neighborhood while 3 of my men drank coffee in a car parked 10 meters away. I felt my throat close. Outside, a strong gust threw rain against the glass and the whole car vibrated for a second. I didn't go to the funeral, he continued. I couldn't face it. I went 2 days later, alone, at night. I sat on the wet grass and apologized to a headstone. From then on, I decided I wasn't going to love anything I could lose. The silence that came after weighed differently from the others. It was the silence of 2 stories recognizing each other without needing translation. And then you walked into my restaurant. And then I walked into your restaurant. I leaned my head against the seat. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the warmth of the coat on my shoulders. His smell mixed with the mist of the rain. We're a problem, I said. Yes, you're the kind of man my mother taught me to avoid. I am. And even so, here I am. And even so, here you are. I opened my eyes. I looked at him. The fogged windows created a bubble around the car, as if the world outside had been suspended for that half hour. The faint light of the dashboard cast a soft shadow on his face. His eyes were dark, but not hard. There was something there I had never seen before, something that didn't match his name, his reputation, the frozen dining room that first night. It was just a man inside a car, beside me, 20 centimeters of breath between us. I stretched out my hand. I touched his face. I felt the short beard under my fingers, the hard temple, the thin scar I had noticed on the hill on Sunday and hadn't dared to ask about. He closed his eyes when my hand landed, closed them like a man who had been cold for a long time, and finally stopped close to something warm. Thank you, I said quietly. Katerina. Yes, I'm trying. I know. He opened his eyes. He looked at my mouth. His breathing grew, noticeable in the silence of the car. So did mine. And he leaned in slowly, like someone who had fought hard before surrendering, and his mouth found mine without haste, without disordered hunger, with a calm that came at a cost. A slow kiss, a kiss that asked before it stated. I answered. My hand left his face and slid down to the collar of his shirt, feeling the cold fabric on the surface and the living warmth beneath, and he let out a low sound in his throat, a sound that didn't match the rest of him, and it was that sound that undid me completely. I kissed him back hard. He held the back of my neck with his large hand, slowly, without gripping, a pressure that held without closing. It was a kiss that lasted a minute and lasted years. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, and for a few seconds neither of us moved. "I'm not going to ask to come up," he said, in a whisper that still came out firm. "I know. I'll take you to the door." "I know." He started the engine. His hands trembled a little on the wheel. I saw it and pretended not to. I kept it to myself as if it were something too delicate to be named. He drove to my building in respectful silence, and when he stopped in front of the iron gate, he didn't immediately let go of the ignition key. He kept looking ahead for a moment, as if finishing a thought. "Tomorrow I'm going to the restaurant," he said. "Early." "Why?" "Because tomorrow Dario is going to try something." I felt my stomach tighten. "Try what?" "Something. I don't know exactly yet." "But did you keep the photos where I asked?" "I kept them." "Good. Go home. Lock the door. Sleep with your phone beside you." I got out of the car. I climbed the steps of the building, feeling the fine rain catch in my hair again. Lighter now. Almost mist. His coat was still on my shoulders. I only noticed when I reached the hallway of my floor. Giada was sitting on the floor, leaning against my door, with an unlit cigarette between her fingers, and a tired smile that could have been from exhaustion or from patience. "I left my keys at the restaurant," she said. "Can I sleep on your couch?" "I don't have a couch." "On your floor, then. Come in." I opened the door. She stood up with the effort of someone who had spent too long on the cold floor. She looked me up and down, saw the too large coat over my shoulders, saw my still damp hair stuck to my forehead, saw something on my face I didn't know was there. "My God," she said. "You were kissed." "Shut up." "Was it by him?" "Shut up, Giada." "It was by him." I pushed her inside. I closed the door. I locked it. She threw herself onto the narrow bed with the familiarity of someone who had slept there before, still laughing softly, and I took off the wet coat and hung it carefully on the chair, as if it were made of glass. Then I sat down beside her. She nudged my knee with her elbow. "You okay?" she asked, no longer laughing. "I don't know." "Are you happy?" "I don't know." "Are you afraid?" "Of that, yes." She nodded, without irony this time. She covered her foot with the blanket and closed her eyes. In 2 minutes she was asleep, the way only Giada could, as if life were in no hurry at all to arrive, and the cold floor were a hotel bed. I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed looking at his coat on the chair, the dark fabric keeping the shape of his shoulders like a memory of volume. I listened to the rain fade slowly outside, from drum to whisper, from whisper to silence. The city of Positano woke early, and when the first boats began to work down below in the harbor, I was still awake, looking at the coat, thinking of Bianca, thinking of my mother, thinking that sometimes 2 stories of loss find each other on a car seat on a rainy night and neither of them knows what to do with it. Around 3 in the morning, I picked up my phone and looked at the screen. No message. There couldn't be one. I didn't even have his number. At 7 in the morning, the room phone rang. It was from the restaurant. It was Dario's voice, low, calm, like it had never been with me, a calm more threatening than any scream. "Katerina, come here now. Something is missing from the register, and I need you to come explain." The line went dead before I could answer. I looked at Giada sleeping. I looked at the coat on the chair. I looked at the door. Chapter 5. The whole dining room saw. I got to the restaurant at 8 in the morning, with the receipts folded in the inside pocket of my coat, and my room key clenched in my hand like a small weapon. The night's rain had stopped, but the sidewalk still gleamed wet, and the smell of the sea rose stronger than that of coffee from the bakery on the corner, a mixture of salt and warm bread that on any other day would have made me hungry. I hadn't slept. Dario's phone call still beat behind my ear like a bell out of rhythm. Giada was standing at the service entrance, arms crossed, with the expression of someone who had fought with her own sleep to get there before me. She squeezed my arm without saying anything, and for a second I understood she was truly afraid. "You're not going in alone," she said, low. "I'm coming with you. If he yells, I yell louder. You yell too much. It's my competitive advantage." I almost laughed. Almost. The dining room still had its lights off, only the back one on, and it was that faint light coming from Dario's office, the door ajar. The other employees gathered in silence near the counter. not knowing whether they could put on their aprons yet, or whether they could be afraid yet. None said anything when I passed. Their eyes followed my every step with the attention of people who know something is about to tear. I crossed the dining room with Giada one step behind me. The corner table was empty. I noticed that before anything else, and the emptiness hurt more than it should. Dario opened the door before I could knock. "Come in, Lo." He hadn't yelled. It was worse. It was the low voice of a man who had already arranged everything in his head. I went in. The office smelled of cold tobacco and old paper. That smell that never left because the windows in there never really opened. He closed the door. Giada stayed outside. I knew, with her ear pressed to the wood. "Money is missing from the register," he said, without preamble, resting both hands on the desk. 400 euros. I counted 3 times yesterday. You were the last one to touch the closing. I didn't touch the register yesterday. Bruno closed it, like he closes it every Tuesday and every Wednesday, for a year now. Bruno says you asked to help. Bruno didn't say that. Bruno's been afraid of you since the day he walked in here, but lying isn't like him. He'll say it. The sentence slipped so cleanly from his mouth that I understood all at once. Bruno would say it. He'd say it because he owed a favor, because he was afraid, because 3 months of pay docked as debt taught anyone to bow his head when the boss asked. "I want to search your bag," Dario said. "No." "What do you mean, no?" "I didn't bring a bag." He looked at me, slowly. He stood up. He came around the desk, in no hurry, like the Knight of the Glass. I recognized the step. I felt my arm hurt in a memory that wasn't from now, the pressure of his fingers on my elbow, the whole dining room pretending not to see. "Take off the coat." "No." "Lo." I said no. He reached out his hand to grab me by the elbow, and it was in that exact second that the office door opened without a knock. Tiziano, in a black suit, high collar, the expression of a man who had come on foot from hell and wasn't tired. Behind him, in the dining room, I heard the bell of the main door, 3 short chimes, and calm steps on the tile floor. Fulvio. He came into the office with a thin leather briefcase under his left arm. He didn't look at me. He looked at Dario first, like someone checking whether the scene matched the report. Only then did he turn his face to me, and his gaze went to the sleeve of my coat and to the inside pocket, in a silent request that I confirm with my hand whether the receipts were still there. I touched the pocket lightly. He understood. "Good morning, Bellini," said Fulvio. His voice was the same as the Knight of the Glass, unhurried, unraised, with that calm gravity that made the air of the office weigh a different way. I felt my shoulder loosen a millimeter, just one. "You don't have a reservation for the morning," said Dario, and his voice came out louder than he wanted. "I didn't come to eat." Tiziano took half a step to the side, opening space, and through the door came 2 more men I had never seen, in light suits, briefcases in hand, the manner of men who come only for money. Behind them, Orlando, with the calm of an old accountant who had seen everything. Last, Bruno, the waiter who was going to say I asked to help with the register, came in with no color in his face, escorted by Tiziano without needing a hand on the back of his neck. The office filled up. It became small and heavy at the same time. "Before you make something up," Fulvio said to Dario, opening the briefcase on the desk without asking permission. "Bruno has been on my payroll for 3 weeks. He sought out Orlando on his own, afraid of you, and told everything. That Signora Lo didn't touch the register yesterday, that you told him to say she had, that he agreed because you dock him 200 euros a month for a debt he never took on, and that he'd been expecting you to take exactly this step since Saturday." Bruno looked at the floor. He couldn't look at me. "You're lying," said Dario. "I don't need to lie." Fulvio took a black notebook from the briefcase. The same one, the notebook I had photographed page by page in the early hours of a Saturday, with my hand trembling, hidden behind the door, my heart beating too loud for a silence that needed to be absolute. Orlando placed beside it a stack of papers with a bank letterhead. The 2 men in light suits opened their briefcase. Receipts, contracts, collection letters with Bellini's name. "Take out what's in your pocket, Caterina," said Fulvio, still without looking at me. I took it out. I placed my receipts on top of the black notebook. There were only a few sheets, folded, crumpled by the coat. They looked small next to the rest. They weren't. "These are the deductions from 2 months of her salary," said Orlando, in a voice almost bored from being so certain. "It matches the ledger. It matches the notebook. It matches what you had printed as a receipt." Dario looked at the papers. He looked at me. He looked at Fulvio. His mouth began to move, but what came out was a short breath. "These gentlemen here," Fulvio continued, pointing at the two in light suits without turning his head, "are the creditors you've been deceiving for 4 years. They came to collect the restaurant, with deed, with mortgage, and with the local judge already informed. You can argue outside, in their car. This is no longer your office. You have no right to—" "I do." Fulvio spoke lower, and that's why the sentence went deeper. "Signora Lowe does. Bruno does. The cook does. Every person you docked has the right to be in this room at this minute. Since they aren't, I am." Dario looked at me. He thought I would lower my face. I didn't. "You're not worth what I was paying you," he said, with a last scrap of courage he could barely spare. "You never paid me what was mine," I answered. It was the first sentence I said in his office in 2 months without trembling. I had waited for it longer than I needed to. "You docked what was mine to cover what was yours. You squeezed my arm over a glass that didn't fall from my hand. You told me to clean it up on my knees." I breathed. Slowly, deep, until the air really arrived. "I won't. Not today. Not ever." I quit. On my feet. From outside the door, I heard Giada's breath release like someone who'd held her air too long. Tiziano didn't move. The 2 creditors led Dario away before he could answer. There was no shouting. There was only the sound of his shoes in the service hallway, slower than usual, and the street door opening and closing with a dry click. The restaurant stayed silent for 1 long second, the kind of silence that happens after something heavy finally falls. Then Giada came in and hugged me so hard it hurt my arm. "I told you I'd yell louder," she said in my ear, "but you yelled without yelling. What a beautiful thing." Orlando gathered the black notebook without comment. Tiziano held the door. Fulvio finally looked at me. He crossed the 2 steps that separated us and stopped in front of me, without touching me. He waited. I understood that he waited because he wanted me to take the step, not him. I took it. He took my hand, in front of Giada, in front of Tiziano, in front of Bruno huddled against the wall, in front of the creditors still passing on the sidewalk outside. He held my hand and said, without theatrics, "No one touches you again as if you had no worth. Not him. Not another. Not me, if I make a mistake." "You're not going to make a mistake," said Giada, at my side, without being called on. "Shut up, Giada," I said, shutting up. The afternoon fell without my noticing exactly. I stayed until the sun went down, helping Giada sort out what was mine in the kitchen cabinets. An apron, a mug, and my mother's thin silver pendant, the same one I squeezed between my thumb and index finger every time Dario passed nearby, and that I had stashed in the pantry drawer a week ago, because I couldn't stand feeling the metal grow warm with fear anymore. I put the pendant back around my neck before leaving. This time, without fear. Fulvio was waiting for me on the sidewalk. Tiziano was in the car, engine off, his elbow on the window. The waterfront smelled of salt and tired sun. The sea broke with a calm I hadn't seen in 2 months. "Where am I going?" I asked. "Wherever you want. I don't have anywhere to want to go." "Then come with me." I looked at the car. I looked at him. I looked at the hill that climbed toward my small room, the hard mattress, the wall with the photo of my mother stuck up with tape. I thought of how many times I had climbed that hill swearing I didn't need anyone. It was true. It was still true. But true wasn't the same as mandatory solitude. "It's not out of fear," I said, more to myself than to him. "I know. It's a choice. It's the only thing I'll accept from you." I got into the car. Tiziano didn't comment. Fulvio closed the door carefully, went around, sat at the wheel. The car climbed the waterfront road slowly, rounding the cliff, and at every turn the city grew smaller down below, more beautiful, less mine. I looked through the glass and tried to understand when exactly I had started to breathe differently, maybe in the office, maybe on the sidewalk, maybe now, with his hand resting lightly on the gear shift, close to my hand, without taking it. Fulvio. Thank you. No. You did it yourself. I only opened the door. I leaned my head against the glass. The surface was cold, and the glass vibrated slightly with the engine, a small sensation that for some reason held me in the present. The sea down below moved dark, somewhere along the coast. A bell rang, faint, far, brief, and it could have been anything. I didn't pay attention. Not yet. The car climbed a little more. The house appeared at the end of the road, white and low, with a wide veranda facing the sea. A light came on inside, on its own, at its programmed hour. Fulvio shut off the engine. I looked at the door. I thought of all the doors I had crossed to get there, of all the no's I'd had to say before in order to be able to say that small yes Now. I opened my door without waiting for him to come around, and I went in. Chapter 6, The Morning After the Sea. The veranda was wider than I had imagined. It had 2 chairs of light wood, a low table, and a lantern lit at the end that cast a yellow light over the stone floor. The sea down below was a black and calm thing, with white points of boats sitting far from shore. Fulvio brought a wool blanket and placed it over my shoulders without asking. I didn't complain. Do you always eat outside? I asked, looking at the table set with bread, cheese, and a wooden-handled knife that looked old enough to have a story. No. Today? Yes. Today? Yes. We sat. He didn't turn on any more lights, and I was grateful for that. The faint light of the lantern left his face in shadow, and it was easier to look at him that way than under the white light of the dining room, where everything seemed to demand a reaction. Here, the yellow light allowed silence. We ate little. We talked less. The wind didn't reach the veranda, but I could hear it in the bushes down below, a constant, low sound that filled the intervals without weighing on them. At some point, I leaned my head against the back of the chair and closed my eyes for 2 seconds, and when I opened them, he was looking at me with the expression of someone who had stopped doing something before I noticed. What is it? I asked. Nothing. Tell me. He took his time to answer. He rested his elbows on the table, joined his hands in front of his face, looked at the sea first, and then at me, as if he needed that order to organize what he was going to say. I'm afraid, he said, in a low voice and without affectation, the way true things tend to come out, of protecting too much, of thinking I know what's best for you, and keeping you in a beautiful house without asking whether you wanted to stay. I kept looking at him. The lantern flickered once, quickly, and went back to burning the same. I'm afraid of loving, I answered, and of losing what I haven't even built yet. My mother died before seeing me happy once, a single time, and I spent so long thinking protection always came with something underneath it that I don't know what to do with a calm night and a set table with no strings attached. We learn. How? Without rushing, I stood up. The blanket slid a little off my shoulders and I let it, because the night air was no longer cold. He stood too, slowly, without approaching, just waiting for me to decide what came next. I crossed the steps between the chairs and stopped in front of him, close enough to feel the warmth coming off his shirt. The lantern at the end of the veranda flickered again. I touched the front of his shirt with my fingertips, without grabbing, just to confirm that he was there and wouldn't dissolve if I came closer. He rested his hand on the back of my neck, with the slow care of someone holding something that might slip away if he made the wrong move. He kissed me gently, slowly, as if he had fought a reasonable while before surrendering, and was determined not to waste the instant he finally stopped fighting. Then he rested his forehead against mine, and we stayed like that for a time I couldn't count, and didn't try to. Can I stay? I asked. You can. Tonight? Tonight. Tomorrow. Whatever you want. I rested my head against his chest. His heart beat faster than his face let on, and that seemed to me the most honest thing he had told me until then. I smiled without him noticing. We stood on the veranda a moment longer, embracing, listening to the sea break against the stones down below in a rhythm that asked nothing of anyone. Then he put out the lantern. The room inside the house had a corner lamp lit, a circle of warm light over the rug. He put that out too. The bedroom door closed. I woke with the light coming in, filtered through a curtain of light linen that swayed a little, gently, where a crack in the window let in the morning air. The room smelled of warm wood and sea spray, and for one whole second I didn't know where I was. Then I remembered, and the memory didn't come with the usual tightening. It came with calm, like the light through the curtain. The sheet was heavy and good, the kind my mother would have liked to have once, and I thought of that with fondness instead of pain, which was also new. I stretched my hand to the other side of the bed, empty, but with the mark of him still warm under my palm. I sat up slowly. I put on a shirt of his that was folded on the wooden chair in the corner, too big, smelling of unscented soap, and of something that was already mine mixed in there, and went barefoot to the kitchen, stepping slowly on the cold floor as if I might break the silence of the morning before it finished existing. He was with his back to me, at the counter, making coffee. The kitchen window looked out onto the sea. The morning light struck his shoulders in a way that hurt a little to look at, not from sadness, but the kind of beautiful thing you didn't expect to find and don't quite know how to receive. I leaned against the doorframe and watched him pour 2 cups with the same silent care he had in everything he did. Good morning, Katerina. His voice in the morning was different, rougher, slower, without the restraint he used in the restaurant or on the streets. I leaned against the doorframe a second longer before crossing the kitchen and sitting down. I said nothing. Neither did he. We had coffee across from each other at the small table. With bread from the bakery I didn't know he had gone out to get, and at what hour. And the feeling that rose in my chest wasn't happiness exactly. It was older than happiness. It was the feeling of not waiting for the next blow, of not monitoring someone's tone of voice, of not calculating how many seconds it would take to become a problem, just sitting, with a warm cup in my hand, in a kitchen smelling of coffee and sea. It was the first time in years I had felt that. I set the cup on the table. I looked through the window. The sea was smooth, almost white where the light struck harder. Somewhere along the coast, far off, I heard a bell ring, deep, spaced out, and then silence. The sound came faint as if it were coming from underwater. For a second I thought about asking whether he had heard it too. I didn't ask. It was too early to give names to small things. "What are you thinking about?" he said. "Nothing." "Liar." I smiled. I pressed the cup to my lips without drinking, feeling the hot steam on the skin of my face. And about how strange it is not to be in a hurry to leave. He stretched his hand across the table and covered mine. He didn't squeeze, didn't guide, just stayed there, heavy and quiet like a promise that needed no words to be serious. I turned my palm up and laced his fingers with mine without thinking, the gesture coming before I could decide whether I wanted to make it. "I need to call Orlando," he said. After a time I didn't feel pass. 5 minutes. "Go." He stood up, kissed the top of my head in passing. Quick, as if it were the most natural thing in the world and not the first time. Took the phone from the counter and went to the veranda. I stayed alone in the kitchen with the morning light and the cup cooling between my fingers. I stood up slowly, crossed the room, and stopped at the veranda door, without going out, leaning against the wooden frame. He was talking low on the other side, phone at his ear and his hand resting on the stone railing. His voice was the business voice, calm, restrained, without harshness or hurry, the same tone I had already learned to recognize as the armor he put on when the world demanded he be a specific thing. The sea behind him remained smooth. A gull passed slowly, high, in no urgency at all. I stood watching him talk. For a second, just one, something small and shapeless passed through me. It wasn't fear. It was a question I didn't even finish forming properly. Whether a man so calm on a morning like that really had all his wars ended, or whether that calm was something he had learned to put on, like the black suit, before the world woke up and realized he was still fighting. I shook my head. I smiled to myself, there in the doorway, with his big shirt on my shoulders and my bare feet on the cold floor of the room. It was too early for questions that had no answer. The coffee was going cold. He would hang up the phone in any second. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for something to fall. I went back to the kitchen, picked up my cup and his, and went to the veranda. I set the coffee on the little table beside the extinguished lantern from the night before. He turned his face, still with the phone at his ear, and looked at me as if the whole morning were starting over from there, as if everything that had come before were only the preface. I looked at the sea. I sat down beside him. "Lena here, that wraps up book 1, and I've already finished book 2. You can get access to it for a really small fee."
I swore no one would touch Katarina again. Then the video arrived, her on the beach, the sun striking her, wet hair smiling at my worst enemy, her voice, crystal clear, cutting through the air. "I never loved you. It was all pretend." The slow gesture of her hand on his chest, the deep kiss unhurried as if the world had stopped just for them, and the ring, my ring, still on her finger, gleaming as it betrayed every promise we made. My chest split down the middle. Part of me was already planning the war. The other part bled, repeating that sentence like a blade. "I never loved you." I saw her eyes, the way she tilted her body, the kiss that lasted a few seconds too long. Do I believe what my eyes saw? Or do I risk everything to save her? From something that maybe doesn't even exist? And if the video is real and I'm about to destroy my empire over a lie, she told herself. And if it's forged and I abandon her, right when she needs me most, and if in the end I lose her, forever? Whether to the truth I saw or to the mistake of not believing, in front of everyone, screaming that she's weak. He doesn't know I'm behind him. But the video still burns in my phone. Now her boss holds her by the arm, and I no longer know whether I'll kill him, or set her free forever.
Like I said, that was just a taste of book 2. To watch it uncensored, just click on the first link here in the pinned comment. I'll see you on the other side in a few seconds. Remember, just click on the first link down here in the comments. And Book 2, complete, with no ads or interruptions, will already be available for you. It's very simple. Book 2 is something I'm loving making, and you're loving it too, so I promise there will be more. It's where you find increasingly spicy stories, a true dark romance. And precisely because this version is getting more and more heated, the video isn't well accepted publicly on YouTube. This closed environment is where I can actually share my essence and where I feel free to do my best work for you. More news coming soon. I'll be waiting for you on the other side. Congratulations, your purchase has been confirmed, and you now have full access to books 1 and 2 of all our stories, completely ad-free and uninterrupted. Everything is available on the My Stories platform, from Mafia romance and billionaire romance to our new Alpha King stories and our spicier tales. This content is ready for you now, with new episodes added daily. Access is simple. Just log in using the same email address you used for your purchase. You can watch on our website or download our official app from the App Store or Google Play. The My Stories platform is very simple and intuitive. Each image represents a story. If it has a book too, just click and press play. Everything is already unlocked for you. You can also add any story to your watch list to save it for later and easily pick up right where you left off. You can also rate each story, leave a like, and write a comment. Your feedback will be visible to all our other subscribers. This is our romance universe, so please, feel free to interact. And whenever you'd like to reach us, just look for the Contact Us button. We read every message, and your opinion truly helps us grow. From this moment on, this is officially your home for romance stories. Just head over to My Stories Romance. And press play. Welcome to the family.